Can you heal from abuse? What do I do after leaving my narcissist? What does a healthy relationship look like? These concerns cross the minds of over 20 people every minute, over 28,800 people every day. And the sad fact is, we still don't talk about it enough. Healing from emotional abuse isn't a band-aid situation, but it doesn't have to take years either. The lives of millions of other survivors around the world have been impacted by their narcissist. Yours doesn't have to. To show you how to live a free, confident, and peaceful life, your host and founder of the Healing from Emotional Abuse philosophy, Marissa F. Cohen.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us this week on Breaking Through Our Silence, the podcast. Today I am so grateful and excited to welcome my friend Mike Sellari to join us to talk about sexual assault and domestic violence and how it's portrayed in movies and TV. Mike has an amazing background with film. Right now he lives in LA as a talent agent, but I do have to say that back in 2006, I believe, I starred in his first student film that he wrote and produced and directed called Men Seeking Woman. And so we go back a long time. He's an awesome person with a great personality, and I'm so excited to have him here. So let's get started. All right, cool. So let's talk about some movies. You're a huge movie buff. You love watching movies. I love looking at your posts on Facebook. Every single time you watch a movie, you kind of critique it. And then every season, I love looking at your lists at the best movies of the year and stuff. So I'd love your perspective on movies with domestic violence, sexual assault themes, and what you think about them.
Well, okay. I mean, right at the top, I feel like I'm already going to be treading into dangerous waters with whatever I talk about, mainly because it's a complicated thing. It's a complicated issue. It's, I mean, there's a lot of different ways we can discuss this. There's a lot of different points of view, and I think every movie is also different. Okay, so I guess it's hard to talk about, because you're saying domestic violence and abuse and stuff like that. And a lot of that also goes back into misogyny. And a lot of that also goes back into the distribution of power between men and women, especially from, I don't know, pre-60s. I don't know. Because like there was that whole like housewife kind of ideal of the 50s and stuff like that. And you can even see that in older movies with just like women be in their place and the aggressor. I mean, even in the 30s, there were still powerful women. You look at stuff like The Philadelphia Story or His Girl Friday or Lady Eve. You see these strong women characters besting the man, but you also see people, I don't know, looking at women in a way that was more of the time. And I guess something that I write at the top to really just say about everything is that it's hard to look at things from the past with 2019 eyes, or 2020. Now it's 2020 eyes. We're going to look back at a lot of stuff because probably every single one of these movies has happened in the past. And some just come from different generations. And I'm going to talk about movies that I also love and I will rewatch still. And it's kind of like you have to just be able to say, look, that was a different time. 50 years down the road, we're going to like look back at like stuff we're doing on a normal basis. And our kids are going to be like, what are you doing? Like, how could you just let that happen? And you're going to say it was a different time. And they're going to say that's a bullshit answer. And we're going to say, look, I know, it's just we didn't realize it. And even like there's stuff 5 years ago that we were laughing at in comedies and stuff like that are now we look at them and we're just like pulling on our collars and going, oh, like it's hard to watch.
Super bad.
Some of that,
great example of that, actually.
And honestly, like a fantastic movie. And it's something also we're going to get into is the idea of like what is art and how far can we push our art and what makes things subversive and versus exploitive versus, I don't know, just gratuitous. And then also just, okay, if we're going to show reality, like, shouldn't that mean we have to show the dark sides of reality? Because if we hide it, then what are we saying about our history and stuff like that? For instance, the idea of, and I mean, this is going into other complicated areas, but like it's like talking about the Civil War and stuff that didn't happen or did happen. We have to remember our history. Or why do we still make movies about slavery and stuff like that? Like, haven't we said all we need to say? And it's kind of like hiding stuff from our past. We don't want to like talk about certain things, but we got to keep it. And I guess something, let's just start off the top. And this is definitely an abusive thing. Let's talk about Michael Jackson for a second, because obviously we've known about his quirks and weird things. And I truly believe he's had a mental illness. And I believe a lot of this does come down from mental illness. And he also had there's a whole thing we could talk about with Michael Jackson and his family, and also just what were people doing and letting their kids just be around him, and also just stuff we decided to turn a blind eye to because of certain things and keep on going. And then Leaving Neverland comes out, and that was an intense documentary. And after that came out, James L. Brooks had announced that they were pulling an episode from The Simpsons from all internet reruns, syndication. Now it's on Disney Plus. It's not on Disney. That episode is not on Disney Plus, and it's not even Michael Jackson's in it. You're not even seeing his imagery. You're not seeing. It has nothing to do with some off-color thing. The premise of the episode is Michael Jackson. Homer goes to a mental institution and meets a mental patient who calls himself Michael Jackson. He's clearly not Michael Jackson, but he's voiced by Michael Jackson. It's weird that we pull that from our history because we know we have to look back and see that we see that. However, James L. Brooks says, like, this is my stuff. I get to make the decision over what I want out there, and I don't want it to seem like Michael Jackson's getting more, his estate's getting residuals or receiving money from this. So when we start just taking things out of our history and out of our films and stuff like that, I worry that we have the ability to repeat ourselves in dangerous ways. It's important to see that stuff. We need to acknowledge that we were off base and learn from it. And we can watch those movies in a different way. We can see them, that they were made at those times. For instance, let's go into now talking about this. So there was a time when rape was a joke. It was kind of funny. It was played off as not a big deal. It was played off in comedies in particular as something that could just happen. And let's talk about specifics here. There's a movie, like, you think back into the early 2000s, there's a movie I actually really like. A lot of people don't. It's called 40 Days and 40 Nights. It stars Josh Hartnett and Sharon Sessman, who I just love. And the premise of the movie is this guy is experiencing a breakup. He's experiencing this, like, obsession with sex and stuff like that. So he decides to not masturbate or have sex or deal with anything in sexual capacity for Lent, for 40 days and 40 nights. And everyone's like, can't do it. It's impossible. And he starts losing his mind, but it's a comedy. Meanwhile, his friends are all betting on the day that he's going to, like, quote unquote bust, and people try to take advantage of that. At the end of the 40 days and 40 nights, his ex-girlfriend bets a lot of money on the final day and then rapes him while he's asleep. And, like, it's seen as just a plot point. It's seen, and then the other girl, the girl who likes him, Sharon Sessman's character, is like, I can't believe you had sex with her. It's not, no, she did it against my will. I was pinned down. It didn't matter. It doesn't matter. In the sense of that story. But then we look at it there, it's like, oh, that's really weird. She just rapes him, and we're not just going to talk about that. And the same thing happens in Get Him to the Greek. It's played for comedy. Jonah Hill's raped by Carla Gallo. You mentioned Superbad a second ago. That's the period blood girl. It's like a reversal of that scene in a way. And yeah, so there's this playfulness. There's that weird moment in Revenge of the Nerds where Lewis puts on, like, this, like, Darth Vader costume and that the jock was wearing, and then the hot girl thinks he's the jock. They have sex. He pulls off the mask and she's like, you're that nerd. And But she's like, that was wonderful. And then she forgets it. It's like he's sexed her into it's okay. We look at that. We look at our back at our, especially in the 80s, the 70s, moments in the 60s, and even the 90s and the 2000s and late 2010s. And we see these moments. It was before really being aware of what we were doing. There's a philosophy I have, and that's what we put on TV really feeds into society, and then society feeds it back. It's a cycle. You see movies, and I can't think of many specifics, where you see where like the guy pursues the girl, she says no, and the idea is it's romantic to keep going and push, and keep doing that. You see it in tons of high school movies. You see it in movies like, let's say, American Pie. You see it in, to an extent, when Harry Met Sally. That teaches us at a young age to say, okay, a no, it just means you have to keep going and push past the no. And one day she'll give you a shot. And so that feeds back into it. And that becomes problematic. However, we've also romanticized a certain thing. There's a term that comes from How I Met Your Mother, which I love and I use in my own daily life. It's called Dobler Dahmer effect, which is an act could be construed as romantic or psychotic based on how the person feels about the other person. It's not an easy explainable situation, what we're talking about here. Because of that, we then get these movies that show us gray areas. I mean, 16 Candles, there's definitely that weird moment where the guy's like, here, just have my girlfriend. And that's another thing of older movies, is women being treated as objects and stuff like that. Obviously, throughout all of the history of cinema and television, we've seen people who combat that. We see Lucille Ball fight back and Mary Tyler Moore be these stronger women on TV. You see and take over what we had. Although you also see the Honeymooners, where Ralph's always threatening to beat his wife. One of these days, Alice, one of these days. And even though she's the power play in that relationship, there's that. I mean, people grew up with that. At the same time, comedy is what we are doing to comment on society in a way. And like it or not, the bad parts are in society. Even like, let's talk about like stuff like you say your kids watch certain things, right? Okay, so Animal House, a movie that I love. My dad showed that to me. I love Animal House. And there's that scene where John Belushi is on the ladder looking at the sorority girls, and they're all just taking off their tops and they're having like a pillow fight. And everyone remembers that scene. And there's the moment where the girl walks into a different room and he's on the ladder and he hops with the ladder. Okay, it's hysterical because it's Belushi hopping on a ladder to get to see what this girl's doing, let alone that he's peeping on her. And even the idea of a peeping Tom was charming in a way. In like these older days, in Back to the Future, I mean, they call him a perv, but George McFly is spying on his soon-to-be future wife getting changed with binoculars from a tree, and he falls from the tree, and that's how he supposedly meets his wife. We see certain things as like, oh, that rascal kind of thing. And Belushi is the most rascally of rascals. We see him do the eyebrow. We see his face. It's got like this baby face. We're inclined to laugh. At the end of the movie of Animal House, there's that moment where the girl's clothes get ripped off by happenstance and the chaos of the whole thing. And John Belushi, dressed as a pirate, swings down and picks her up and puts her in a car, and she's screaming and her legs are kicking. And then the last moment he drives off with her. Then later it cuts and he has her arm around her. She's sitting in the car. She's happy. And then later you realize they become Senator and Mrs. Ludo Potowski. Like it's like he stole her and she became his wife and everything worked out. And we know that that's not how real life works. And to an extent, we know that Animal House isn't real life. We know that Revenge of the Nerds isn't really how college goes. We look at Porkies and we say that's not how real life is. I mean, Porkies is a really great example. I mean, that's a movie that's played for laughs all the way through. Weird. And also, I want to go back to a different time, talking about a different time. Like, here's the Rotten Tomatoes critics' consensus for Porkies. And I quote, "Gleefully in its misogyny and celebratory of bad behavior, Porkies is an intermittently funny farce that will leave audiences feeling in need of a shower." And that's weird. Like, that's just weird. And I mean, the most famous scene of Porky's is the shower scene where it's a group of girls completely naked. And to that extent, like we look back in the past and it seems very gratuitous, and to a point like those TNA movies were just meant as like softcore porn to show to kids and stuff like that. That's why Porky's isn't meant to be taken seriously, although it's problematic. There are these guys and they're peeping on the girls. And what does that teach other guys? Like there's a hole in the shower and they're looking and the girl gets in the way, and so they yell to move, and the girls laugh. They're like, it's charming that these guys are spying on us. We laugh at that. There's also, even in Scary Movie 1, like people are just beating up women, and it's played for laughs. It's like kind of like when you see like a Naked Gun movie or something, and Leslie Nielsen punches an old woman or something, or even in like an Austin Powers movie, these like very like hyper worlds. We laugh, and you'd say like, is it funny to punch an old woman? And you think about like, and it's weird, but the correct answer is in the right context. This is like, he knocks the girl to the ground and then jumps like a wrestler and lands on his elbow off screen. And you hear like a noise. Like it's these things that are played for funny. And that actually wouldn't be funny if it was a guy. The reason it's funny is because it's taken to such an extreme. It's not even that's even a plot point of the movie. It's meant as like almost slapstick comedy. It's meant as like a hyper realized version of Marx Brothers or Stooges or something like that. You could analyze it in a way. And if I'm being too analytical or something, stop me. I feel like I could go on.
No, I'm really
all right. If you want to move away from the playfulness and talk about it as a serious subject, I mean, we can do that. I mean, rape and abuse is used as like a weapon. I mean, let's talk about the ones that use it better and talk about it like thematically. So there's things that are also books that have become movies. So let's talk about something like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. The whole premise of The Girl and the Dragon Tattoo, or I guess I shouldn't say premise, I should say themes, is about the violation of women and the violence against women. You have this guy investigating this family and this death of this woman, of this girl, and who killed this person. At the same time, he's teamed up with this woman whose life has been shaped by abuse. She's a lesbian. She's being raped by her parole officer, who is forced to like give blowjobs to in order to not land in prison because he controls her, and it's this power dynamic. And you watch these scenes and they're visceral. There's that scene in his office and you see his hand just around her head. Like you're not seeing anything really. It's very close up, but it's hard to watch. And you say to yourself, well, okay, do we need to see that? Can it be implied? And the problem with implying it is, this is what happened in the older movies. You would see stuff happen off screen. You would hear people just say things, and it becomes not that bad if we're just saying words. When we start seeing stuff, it then becomes more visceral. And something about a movie, there's something about art even, it's supposed to invoke a feeling. And there's a reason why we still talk about these movies today. It's not because it's like, oh, can you believe they did that? It's like, no, there's something artistic here. There's something that's trying to be said. Also, rape is used to show savagery. There's that mentality that we put that on the savagery. One of the, I think, most universal movies that I think people had seen that showcased rape in a savage way was Deliverance, which do you know Deliverance?
Again, I know of it, but I haven't watched it. I'm not as cultured as you are.
I wouldn't call myself cultured. I just call myself someone who watched a lot of movies. Deliverance is a John Boorman movie that is honestly, it's good. I mean, this is like an Oscar caliber movie. I mean, the movie has, I want to say, it's Ned Beatty of the Beatties, Sean Connery, John Voight. It's basically these four friends decide they're going to go like down a river canoeing. They're going to live in the wilderness, and Sean Connery is this really man's man who knows the wilderness. One of the guys is more of like a white collar kind of guy. And there's these locals that, like, I guess are just, they're played up as these like rednecks, and like they are of their own area. It's almost like their own law and stuff like that. And they're in two different canoes, and they get separated, and one of the canoes crashes, and the two guys happen upon these two rednecks who basically beat them, tie them to a tree, forces one of the guys to strip naked, squeal like a pig, and then rapes him. they kill these locals, and now all the other locals are after them. And it becomes this fight for survival. And you say, like, by the end of the movie, you see what happens. And you're like, this is this ordeal these people have gone through. Like, and it is an ordeal. It's crazy, like how almost like primal it becomes. And I think that's part of what Deliverance is. It's showing that primalness. Some people would say, do you need to have that rape scene there? Couldn't it just be violent or something like that? And I don't know the answer to that, honestly.
If you enjoyed this podcast, you have to check out www.marissafaycohen.com/private-coaching. That's www.marissafaycohen.com/private-coaching. Marissa would love to develop a made-for-you healing plan to heal from emotional abuse. She does all the work and you just show up. Stop feeling stuck, alone, and hurt, and live a free, confident, and peaceful life. Don't forget to subscribe to the Healing from Emotional Abuse podcast and follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Marissa F. Cohen and Instagram at marissa.fay.cohen. We'd love to see you there.